Welcome to How to Decorate from Barrell Designs, a weekly podcast all about the trials and triumphs of decorating and redecorating your home. I'm Caroline. I'm on the marketing team.
And I'm Taryn, and I'm a product designer.
I'm Liz. I head up the creative team.
We're your hosts. Join the expert team at Barrell Designs for tips, tricks, and tales from interior designers, stylists, and other talents in the design world.
Plus, we'll answer your decorating dilemmas at the end of each episode.
We love answering your questions, so don't forget to email us at podcast@ballarddesigns.net.
Now, on with the show. All right, so this week we are thrilled to welcome to the show New York-based interior designer and author Emma Kemper. Her work has been recognized in publications like Architectural Digest and House Beautiful, and earlier this year, she released her first book, House Rules: 100 Ways to Feel at Home. It's a practical guide to decorating your home, and Emma, we're excited to chat about it. Thanks for letting us take an early glance at it.
Thanks for having me here. I'm so excited to speak to you.
Yes, this is truly a beginner's guide. Although I guess, you know what, you could enjoy it at any level, but if you are a beginner, it's a great first introduction to tackling a room or tackling a whole home project that you're feeling overwhelmed about.
Oh, totally. I feel like after reading this book, I've gotten a degree in project management, interior design, how to be an organizer, and how to be a stylist.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm good.
Well, I'm so happy you feel that way. Thank you. I was really writing it for like my younger self when I was first starting to think about becoming an interior designer, and I didn't really know where to start. I felt like there was no one place where I could kind of go, just reference everything, pick it up kind of in any part of a project. And so that's the book that I wrote. And it's meant to take you through like the entirety of a project, from like how to gather inspiration and think about a budget, all the way to like how high to hang a picture on the wall and how to mix and match patterns, and just things that I feel like are common pitfalls or can just feel really intimidating if you haven't done it before. And it's just like very easy, digestible, actionable tips and tricks.
It is, yeah. And I felt like it would be a great like graduation book or
first home gift.
Yes, first home gift, wedding gift. Like you said, if you are super interested in interior design, you may know some things, but you probably won't know a lot of the things in here. I felt like there were many things that I was like, oh, we've recorded 400 episodes of this podcast, and I was still, kind of taking notes. But definitely, awesome. If you're starting out, you'll find a lot in here that is helpful.
Well, it was honestly kind of like that for me too when I was writing it, because there's all these things that you just do on a day-to-day basis, but you don't ever stop and really think like, why am I doing this? How could I explain this to somebody? But if you're tasked with like sitting down and writing 100 steps to do your job, whatever your job is, you end up learning so much also. So I actually was really surprised by that part of the book, and also really enjoyed that part of the process. And also, something I did not know is writing a book is at least for me, it was like a really long process. So at this point, I wrote this book like 3 years ago. So I pick it up now and I'm like, oh yeah. And that's kind of fun too.
Yeah. Forgot about this. What are some things that you learned in the process that maybe were surprising?
It was more just that I never really like thought through some things that I naturally did. So the part that I kind of enjoyed writing about the most, and not like learned, but just like thought about further and kind of explored in a different way, was how to gather inspiration in the beginning of a project. Because I think for me, that's a really fun step. And for all of our residential projects, it's kind of the first thing that we do. But that can also be very overwhelming. Just like, what do you mean, go find inspiration? And I also feel like a lot of times people are asked, where do you find inspiration? The answer is just everywhere, which is, I believe that, but it's not necessarily helpful. So to like sit down and think about like, okay, what am I looking for? I'm looking for things that highlight what I already love about my home. I'm looking for homes that feel similar to mine. I'm looking for spaces that have made really big impressions on me. And then sitting down and like looking for patterns in those, and just kind of like how to think about that and how to do it. So it's not necessarily that was like a new phenomenon to me, but I had just never
articulated it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being able to like put together mood boards of like color or thoughts about what you want is one thing, but I really think like there's a step in there that's like take notes and find the patterns
Yeah.
in what you've already found and what you're drawn to that I thought was really important.
Yeah, totally. And then I think it's also about like take really good notes on your mood boards and try to reference your notes more than the pictures, because I think it's also really easy to fall into like copying designs that you see.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're interpreting your notes about the pictures instead of the pictures themselves, if you kind of have this like liberty in that and you're moving away from what somebody else did, but you're still informed by it.
I liked that aspect. And, I actually feel like sometimes the mood board and like the inspiration time in a project, it feels so easy because it's a little bit like low risk, but in some ways it is very easy to get off track because you could start pinning the wrong things and collecting the wrong inspiration things that you arguably can't even achieve in your space. Like you gave the example of if you live in a like industrial loft, then pinning something like farmhousey is not helping you. It's probably distracting you because that's not going to be the end result of your project. So try to find things that are inspiring but also relevant to your project. Because I think people do that all the time. You're like, oh, I'm just going to pin this like beautiful exterior of like a, Cape Cod or something. And then you live in like a ranch in Kansas. And it's like, it's easy to think like, I want that when there's all these other options of something close to what you have, also beautiful, that like are more accomplishable. Anyway, I just feel like it's easy to get off track.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I think it's like everybody likes all different things, I think. Like that's human nature. And if everyone could have 10 houses, you can have all of those things. But you do kind of have to like zone in on where are you? What are we actually talking about here? And then I think that yields the most successful design.
Yes. And you have several chapters about that.
Yeah, I do.
You've got sense of place, play to your strengths, beware trends.
Yeah, so many helpful hints in here. Now, I know when I'm collecting inspiration for mood boards, I'm kind of a like pin it and forget it type of person. Like I'm throwing Instagram things into a folder, I'm throwing pins into a folder. And what's the best way to kind of go back through that and kind of figure out what's going to be an appropriate thing for me to put on a mood board that's realistic?
I think once you have like a decent amount of images gathered, it will become obvious what the outliers are. And if something just isn't gelling with the rest of the images, I think you can cut that one out. Mm-hmm. Unless, of course, it's like the one that you're the most excited about, and then definitely leave it in. But I think like in the natural course of a project, you'll kind of know when you're ready to move into the next stage. Like you'll be like, okay, I kind of understand like what the concept's going to be, what I do want this to feel like. And now I'm ready to, actually implement all of these things. You could also, if you really feel like you're kind of spiraling out, you could just give yourself like a timeline. Like by the end of this week, I'm going to start making decisions, and then give yourself that deadline, look at what you have, and just like force yourself to keep going.
A deadline is always helpful.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about mood boards versus scheming. So scheming is something that you talk about in the book. And can you define what the difference is between those two processes?
Yeah, of course. So mood boards to me is more like inspiration images. So that's putting together ideas of things that you can implement, but it's not actually like, this is the table that I'm going to buy. It's more like, I like the idea of a round table and I like how this finished living room looks, but it's not like a link to purchase. So that comes first, and that's kind of what you're looking for those patterns in. And then once you've identified what those are, you're like, okay, I do need a round table. It has to be 60 inches. And so you find maybe 3 tables that you like. And then that's taking a look at those tables and whatever chairs you've pulled and a rug for that room and whatever, and kind of playing around with those different decisions is scheming. So one is more conceptual, and then one is actually putting your design into a schematic and figuring out what you want to move forward with.
So it's moving it into reality, taking your mood boards and putting them into reality?
Exactly.
Okay. That's awesome. And so scheming, you would want to do that in the actual space and kind of really understand
I think
what you're
it's really
doing.
helpful whenever you can to do as much as you can in the actual space, because there's always things that you kind of just forget to consider or like aren't aware of, or I feel like it's such a design cliche, but lighting is like so important on how everything looks. So if you have the opportunity to play with these materials in the actual space, it's a lot easier. And I think it's like, it feels a lot more natural. Like you kind of know what you should pick, I think, at that point. Um, Especially like when you're designing for a client, it doesn't always work out that way. But if you're doing your own home and you have the opportunity to do it, I would always go that direction. Even if it feels kind of weird to be like moving through your house, like setting up these different scheming stations, I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, and there's always that random thing like an air vent or
Yes.
funky section of the wall that's irregular or something. Like there's always those
100%.
random
Yeah. A
things that
light switch where
yeah.
you wanted a picture or like, yeah, always.
Yeah, and those are so annoying.
So annoying.
But you're not going to move the light switch. I guess maybe some people might, but yeah, so it could totally throw it off. So it's good to see it in person. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And also the other part of the like lighting element is checking it out like in different times of day and also
Mm,
maybe in different weather if it's like a rainy day or something, because it really can like paint, I think specifically, change so much, and paint is so impactful in a room that that's not something that you want to leave to chance.
yeah. You actually had a great section in here about lighting, and I think actually maybe it was in the paint color section about picking paint, which we can get to in a little bit. But that's also something I think is so important about observing the actual space you have is being realistic about the lighting that you have.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a really bright, well-lit room, but no amount of white paint is going to take a room that gets no sunlight and make it feel bright and airy. So, yeah, just, maybe be honest with yourself about those light conditions.
Yeah. And I feel like being honest with yourself is kind of a theme throughout the book. It's because it's
Totally.
so easy to just like idealize all of it. And you see these pretty pictures on Instagram, and everyone can have a beautiful home. Absolutely.
Mm.
But I think it's like, be realistic about what is your space? What is your budget? What are your DIY capabilities? Like some people can, reupholster their own chairs. It's a miracle if I can paint a wall. So it really just like be honest with yourself.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I found that to be like the kind of running theme throughout the whole book is really how to plan, how to shop, how to keep all that information with you at all times so
Yeah.
you can make informed decisions and stay organized. So whether you are just painting a room or you are taking on a whole renovation, like all of those steps are there for you, which is really so
Mhm.
helpful.
The other thing that I think is actually sometimes surprising to people is the book itself is very physically small, but it's meant to be like a little handbook that you can kind of tote around with you and bring to stores and like reference again. Or, if you ever feel like you need to check up on something, you can bring it around with you with your
Mhm.
swatches and your plans and, all of the things that you just mentioned.
Yeah, I think it needs a supplemental workbook
That's a
so that
great
we can
idea.
Yeah.
I love
keep
that
all our
idea.
swatches together.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
There you go. Next steps.
Volume 2. Yeah.
Can we talk about paint for a little bit? Because I really liked your section about paint and, in particular, the paint schedule. This is something that we have heard, or I have definitely heard designers talk about. I'm not sure we've ever talked about it on the show, but very smart, very organized. And can you kind of explain to everybody what a paint schedule is?
Yeah. So a paint schedule is like a key throughout your project. It's basically a little chart that you should make for yourself. It lists out what the room is that you're working on, what is the surface in that room, the brand of the paint color, the paint finish, and then I always like to include a section for notes. An example of a note could be like, um, this area should be hand brushed or whatever. Um, but basically, it's really helpful because if you're not painting yourself, if you're handing it off to a painter, everything is very straightforward and very organized. If you end up needing to do paint touch-ups down the road, everything is very well recorded for you. So there's never any confusion about like, which can of paint am I supposed to be reopening? Um, And it's really just like a good way of organizing a project. We do schedules for all paint, all materials, all furniture. And really, when you're talking about like any kind of bigger scale renovation, it's really important to record everything because it just gets confusing so quickly. And the schedule for the paint is really the schedule we follow kind of for all of those other things I just mentioned. And it's just, it's your guide essentially for whatever it is that you're working on.
I felt like this is a crucial thing for anyone building a house, because if you are building a house, you know that there's a zillion surfaces to paint.
Yeah.
And you do not want your contractor calling you in the middle of the day with like, what's the trim on here? And then, or even worse, just painting whatever they think makes the most sense, which is probably not what you think makes the most sense. And then they have to go back and redo it. So I just felt like that is, if nothing else, you need it for the paint schedule, because especially if you're building a house, just because it's something designers do all the time, but it never has occurred to me to write it all out like that.
Oh, that is so interesting. I'm actually so happy to know that that's your takeaway, because I wouldn't have realized that was so impactful. I'm happy it helped.
I just feel like those are the type of things that like, you're like, oh, I'll remember. And then like you come back later, you never remember that.
Yeah.
No, how could you? And it's like, especially because so many people do like neutral paint. So then you have 3 different shades of white. They're all in different finishes. And you're just like, how would I ever know this?
Yeah. And I have, for example, in our living room, I did the same trim and wall color, like in a white, right? But then the white is used on all the trim around the house. But then in your basement, you've got like the flat white, you've got the ceiling white, you've got the trim white. They're all different ones, and they kind of look the same. I mean, even on the wall. And I have definitely touched up using like satin, not realizing that the wall color, or I'm sorry, anyway, whatever. I'm confused now just talking about it, which shows you that I was definitely confused trying to touch it up and like touched up in the wrong finish essentially. And then it didn't look right and had to do it anyway. So
yeah, no, it's very easy to do.
Right.
It's an easy mistake to make.
Yes. And that's something that I've certainly heard designers talk about, like, oh yeah, our paint schedule, but you never visualize what that really means. So I thought that was cool. What about, paint color is like such a, just, I think, troubling aspect of a project for many people because there's so many options, and getting the wrong paint color is really easy and can really throw things off. So what do you think are some common things people do wrong when picking a paint color? And what advice would you give them?
I think probably a really common pitfall is, instead of doing paint swatches on your wall, looking at the website photos of whatever the color is, which is really helpful to give you a general idea of what it is, but it doesn't honestly really mean that that is how your room is going to hold that paint color. So I do think it's extremely important. I know I kind of said this before, but I just really feel like you can't not paint in the room. And also, you can't look at the paint until it's dry because it looks completely different. So if you do that whole swatching process, give yourself a few hours and then come back to it, because you actually might have a completely different reaction than when you first put it on the wall. And then I also think people are maybe a little bit too timid about paint, because it does make such a big difference. It's also the easiest thing to redo. Like if you paint a wall and you hate it, paint it again. It's okay. I mean, not to be like flippant about it, but of all the things, like it's not so scary. So I feel like you can give yourself permission to do something that's like a little bit more fun or a little bit more bold. And probably you will love it. But if you don't, you paint it again.
Yeah, but like test it.
Totally test it. Always test it.
Oh gosh. I've definitely, even, and you're probably, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I have to test it like multiple times. So I'll like go and I'll do my research and I'll pick like 5 colors. I'll test all of those. And then inevitably none of them are right. And I have to go test it again, like a few lighter, a few darker, some a different tone. And so I feel like it takes a lot of patience. Going in and like giving myself time is the most helpful, because if the painter is coming tomorrow, then you're probably going to pick the wrong color because you just aren't giving yourself enough time to like go back to the paint store, get more samples, test it again, and you just don't want to be making that decision under duress.
No, that's so true. And especially because then it like starts creeping into the night and then you don't have the light to see the paint colors. And like, no, that sounds very stressful.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's definitely something I've done wrong and suggest to not avoid if you can, or avoid if you can. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing you talked about with paint, just in the book that I enjoyed, is you were kind of talking about like using paint to accent or camouflage things. Like use a contrasting trim or color to accent aspects you like. Can you kind of explain that a little bit?
So if you paint something the same color as your walls, whether it's like an exposed pipe or a radiator or even a piece of furniture, maybe that you're not trying to highlight, it will make it kind of disappear a little bit, like hide into the room. The opposite of that is if there is something kind of special about your room that you want to stand out, maybe it's a cool piece of millwork. Maybe it is an exposed pipe and you want it to feel like an industrial space and you're trying to play that up. Kind of same thing. You can use paint to your advantage to highlight that. And to circle back on the painting of the furniture comment, it also works to help make your room feel a little bit bigger, because if you're like making those items disappear, you're almost like mentally creating more space in your room, if that makes sense. So if you have like something we've done a couple times, if we're working with a really small footprint, we've bought, I think it's the Billy bed from IKEA. It's just like a really, really simple wood headboard basically, and painted it the same color as the wall. And it almost disappears. Like it's so simple, but it like makes the room feel a little bit bigger. It's less imposing than something else. Really, that trick kind of works for anything in the room that you're trying to not call attention to.
This just tends to come up, I think, in our decorating dilemmas. We had one fairly recently where someone had like a tray ceiling that they didn't like, and it was like 3 different paint colors. And so I think sometimes people get really like hung up on what's the right color for this to be, and just thinking like same color camouflage, different colors accent, like that
Exactly.
is just such a universally applied rule. But sometimes I think when you're in the like details, you can kind of talk yourself in circles trying to figure out what's makes sense.
No, absolutely. It's like a little like cheat sheet, I feel like, if you just keep thinking that in your head. Because it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, okay, I don't like that ceiling, don't highlight it.
Yeah.
But it's like less straightforward, I feel like,
Yeah, when you have a problem you're trying to figure out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think at the same time, like color drenching could be really imposing and really kind of like scary to take on. But to your point earlier, it's just paint. Like just try it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think people also get nervous that they're going to get sick of a paint color, like a color clear. And I talk about this in the book, but it's like, it's not, I don't think like it's more boring to just like default to gray or white or whatever. And I feel like that's what you're going to get sick of, because you didn't want white or gray. You were just scared to do something else. So that's not like, don't choose. That's not a good reason, I don't think, to choose something. Or it's like a fun color that you really love. Yeah, maybe eventually you'll change your mind. But if you love it, like, I wouldn't worry so much about that.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the thing that's going to make you want to change it is not liking it in the first place. You know what I'm saying? Like,
exactly,
if you
totally
pick something you love, it's going to have way more longevity than something you're lukewarm about, but that you think is safe.
Absolutely.
And it's like, it seems so it's like such a no-brainer, but I think it's hard to like commit to, which I get. Yeah. But if you find just the right color for your room, even if it's a color and something a little bold, and you've tested it out, it goes with what you've got, then like you're probably going to have longevity with it because you did all your homework.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like if you're making informed decisions about the colors you're choosing, meaning like you did your mood boards, you really know what you like, you tested out a bunch of these colors, like what more could you need? You like this, go for it.
Yeah, you did your homework. Yeah.
You did it. Yeah.
Yeah. I really liked your section about the color wheel, because that's something that both Liz and I both geek out over and have talked about, but I don't know that we've really ever talked about it on the show, and I liked the way you laid it out. So tell everybody like how you think about using the color wheel and picking a color palette, and some easy ways to kind of put it into practice.
So what I like about the color wheel is that I think that it can feel so intimidating to figure out like what colors go with what colors. And it almost just gives you like a little guide of this is what the actual rule is, you can now that you know that, you can implement it, and it lets you figure out what palette you want to do. So in the book, I kind of go through what the different color schemes are and give examples of how, or color palettes are, and give examples of how you can use them. And also talk a little bit about which ones are commonly seen in interiors, which ones to maybe avoid. And then it also gets a little bit into color psychology and just like, what do these different palettes make you feel like? And for me, that one is more just like, really, I kind of feel like this is a rule that you're allowed to break. Like, whatever colors you like, you should go for them. And I think like ultimately it's that. But if you're not feeling confident in that, using the color wheel kind of teaches you like, okay, here's like a good, I don't know, like boundary parameter, I guess, formula for you to use.
Well, I like, like using an analogous color palette. Wait, analogous is the one that's, hold on. See, I need your handy cheat sheet.
I honestly need the book too. As soon as you brought this up, I was like, oh gosh.
Complementary is like the opposite of what you think it's going to be. It's when they're opposites, right? Yes.
That's right.
They're
Yeah,
across
that's
from
right.
each other on the color wheel. So think like
Right. Blue and orange.
Blue and orange, right.
Yeah.
So orange is going to like energize blue. So if you want a room that is calming and you want to have blue as your main color palette, then don't add orange in there, because then it's going to like add energy to the room. Instead, add green, which is going to, it's just like a very
That's exactly right.
templated way to think about the color, and you can kind of take that in any direction, but at least gives you a pathway to narrow down, because like there's so many colors and you can go so many directions, but like what's going to achieve the mood that you put your mood board together and get you there.
Yeah, it gives you like a little like recipe kind of. If you feel like you're just too overwhelmed to choose, which it is very overwhelming to choose, it helps you be like, okay, you can choose whatever colors you want, but here's like a safe path of getting your desired result.
And I like the analogous color. Yeah, those are the ones that are side by side. For like, if you are just starting out and you're a little bit nervous, and say you love blue and white, but you like add a little green in there, it blends so easily because they're so close together.
Yeah.
But it's at least adds a little bit more of a layer. And so it kind of, and you could apply that to anything in the color wheel, but like that is just an easy kind of trick for someone brand new.
Yeah, completely. And then it's also, how much of each of those colors. So it's like create like a hierarchy within that. So if you're going with blue and white, maybe blue is your like hero color. You're going to do 60% blue. And then white is like your next hero, I guess. So do 30%, and then green can be your 10% kind of little accents here and there.
I want to double back and talk about preparing for a project. And you do such a great job at like teeing everybody up for all of the like practical preparations, and then really kind of setting a shopping list and getting the most out of your budget. I feel like those tips are throughout the whole book. But if we were to start at the beginning, where's the best place to start with a project, and how do we develop a shopping list?
Yeah. So what I like to do is basically just make a list in Google Sheets of what are all of the things that I'm going to need to do to get this room from where it is to where it needs to be. And so that will include like, I need to paint the walls, and I need to buy a new couch, and I need to hang my art, and I need to reframe this other piece of art. Basically just like all of that stuff. And then go back and like break that down even a little bit more. So it's like, I need to paint my wall, so I need to buy the paint, and I also need to hire a painter. Or I need to buy a new piece of art, and I'm also going to need a frame, and I'm also going to need someone to come hang this up. And basically just try to be like in the weeds with that list as you can. Get anything you can think of, just like try to put it on a piece of paper. And then go through, and if it's an item that you're buying, go to a store where you would shop. So maybe it's like CB2 or whatever. Plug in the most expensive sofa. Give yourself like a little cushion, but just like give yourself some type of guide for what that's going to cost. Because I think it happens all the time where people just don't realize how much money it's going to cost to do any kind of redecorating. But there's just so many things that you need, and it really does just add up so quickly. So once you've given yourself kind of placeholder numbers for all of that stuff, and I would say for things like painting, if you don't know how much it's going to cost to hire a painter or hang the art or whatever, call around or like look on Reddit for people in your area. Like really try to give yourself a realistic understanding, because the worst thing would be if you got through, 10 out of the 20 items and then you had to stop halfway because you didn't budget correctly. So I like from the very beginning to kind of have an understanding of what all those numbers are going to be. And then you really just like work through that list. So, in order of, and also actually, I would say give yourself like a little cushion, because there's also unexpected costs. Like even when you plan out everything really well, there's just always things that come up. So give yourself like a 10 or 15% little buffer, I would say. And then that way, as you're working through the project, you have money set aside for like throw pillows and cute little things to put on your desk, and like the things that people actually want to buy and it's fun to spend money on, but sometimes you don't get to that because you just spent so much on like something that wasn't even fun to buy.
That's really great. And Google Sheets is something you can keep on your phone. Like you can reference it on your phone at any time too, like while you're out in the field shopping.
Yes,
and getting
totally.
caught up.
Exactly. It's so easy to fall in love with something and then you go back and you're like, oh, I wasn't supposed to spend that.
You also have a little bit of a formula on where to shop, which I thought was really interesting. You have kind of a little bit of a rule of thirds.
Yeah. So what we like to do for our projects, I like to have 1/3 be kind of big buck stuff. So things that will offset the price of the more like special pieces that you're finding. So that means like Pottery Barn, Room and Board, Crate and Barrel, that kind of store. 1/3 custom or bespoke. So it could be something that we're like actually making, or it could be something that like we found it in a flea market and we're recovering it. And because of that, it's like bespoke too. It doesn't need to be actually something that like you commission someone to make. And then 1/3 vintage pieces, or maybe pieces that are your own. So it's vintage, but you're not buying them. And what I think that does is it kind of helps to keep the budget in balance. And it also makes your space look really personal, because I think the worst thing is when you buy everything from like Anthropologie or wherever, whatever, and you walk into that person's home and it feels like you just bought that showroom. Like, I feel like it's so important to kind of mix in personal pieces and pieces that you have a personal connection to. Maybe it's like you bought it while you were traveling, or it was your grandmother's, but you like lacquered it, or whatever, the things that are exciting and you feel connected to those pieces because they're yours and they're special. But it's unrealistic that like every single piece is going to be like that. So trying to stay within those boundaries, I think, is a really good balance.
That's really interesting. And it's one of the things that we at Ballard like totally think about all the time, because we like to customize everything that we offer. So it's that it kind of like balances between the bespoke and
yeah, it's so true.
Yeah,
it really is, because it's like you can make it your own, but it's a very reasonable price point. It's like it's kind of the perfect sweet spot.
Yeah. What are some things that when we're out shopping that we should be doing to make sure that we're set up for finding the right item? Like, what's the best way to go out there and to get into the stores and to go shopping?
So I think that understanding the scale of the piece that you're looking for is so important. So going in with your floor plan and knowing, like, I'm looking for a dining table, but it cannot be more than, 72 inches, whatever. And then also, I really like fall back on mood boards so much, but also just knowing what's my design concept, meaning like, how do I want my home to feel? What's like the through thread throughout my entire design, and always checking back in with that. And I feel like, and again, the budget actually. So then kind of knowing those three things, what do I want it to feel like? What is the size and what's it going to cost? You can kind of narrow down a lot of what you're picking through, and hopefully find something that you love.
Yeah. And getting swatches when you're out shopping, I think, is really a huge thing to do, especially when you do go back to that stage where you bring it on back and you're kind of scheming in that room.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like as much as you are allowed to bring home with you, you always should, because it's so nice to be able to sleep on it. So if it's like physical samples of anything, I think that's so great. Tear sheets, I think, are so helpful. And the other thing that I like to do with swatches of anything are like, if you have kids or pets or you're like, I love red wine. I don't know, like spill it on the swatches and see how it holds up.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of the pet hair. Like, take
Yes.
your sofa fabric, rub it all over your dog. What does the pet hair look? I'm dead serious.
I
I've
love
done this.
that.
Like, I had a brown dog, and so I wanted to know, like, is this brown hair going to show up on my sofa? Like, how obvious is it going to be? Or, if you've got a white dog or whatever it is, like, test it
It's
out.
so
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
I actually feel like fabrics and swatches are one of the biggest places where people are likely to make the wrong choice, partially because it's really easy when you're shopping to think, okay, I want a roll arm sofa and I want it to be like beige. You can find that in a lot of different places, but the quality of the fabric could be vastly different at each of those places. So while they all look the same in theory, they're going to perform very differently. And the quality and choice that you make in the fabric, in some cases, I think is way more important than even the frame sometimes, because if you don't pick a good fabric, it doesn't matter how good the frame is because it's not gonna wear well and it's not gonna look good and you're gonna want to get rid of it. So,
I totally agree with that.
but like, I think people just like don't test drive their fabrics enough.
Yeah. And I think also like so many people, and definitely myself included, buy so much online. And I feel like there's like all these memes about like what I thought I was ordering on Amazon, and then it's like a dollhouse chair or something, which like if it's your whole sofa and you didn't look at that in person beforehand, that's terrible. Like that's a huge purchase. And it makes such a big difference what the fabric is, how it feels, how it wears, all of those things. You have to test it out.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This is like my soapbox. Order a yard of we sell all of our fabrics that we put on our sofas. We sell them by the yard. Order a yard, wrap your sofa cushion in it, test it out, sit on it for a month, let your dog sit on it, drink your red wine on it, and then see, can you clean it up? What does it look like? Is it like wrinkly? Is it, I don't know.
Is it going to pill?
Yeah, is it gonna like just test it out and make sure, because if you hate it, then you only spent $40, not $4,000.
Completely.
Right. It's kind of the same thing too, like with the paint swatches, right? Like you're putting paint swatches on your walls, but if you can get a yard or two of the fabric that you want to put on your sofa and really kind of see how the light's affecting that, like, what does it look like in the daylight? What does it look like in mood lighting? And and definitely how it wears.
Yeah.
No, it's so true. It's so important. I think also similarly for wallpaper, like order one roll, tape it up on the wall and see what you think, because it's so much better to buy one roll and decide you don't like it than to wallpaper your entire room and then you're kind of stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So sample, go big.
Yes.
Yes. Well, and just, really do your due diligence with fabric. A beige sofa can perform in hundreds of different ways, and like they're not all the same. So don't think that just because it's a, solid fabric that it's going to look like the other one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Completely. Yeah.
One thing that I thought was so interesting is one of your chapters was to avoid built-in tech. Can you expand on that? Because I 100% agree with you, but I felt like it was such an unusual thing to point out, but such great advice.
I think that tech dates itself way more quickly than like mostly anything else that you put in your house. So I think that when you put in like automatic shower controls or something, 3 years from now, that's going to look so dated, and you're not redoing that. That's in your bathroom. I also, but like maybe this is just me, I feel like they're harder to control and like more likely to break. So just all around, like I feel like keeping that stuff separate, like use apps are fine and whatever. I'm not saying like live in the dark ages, but I just think anything that's attached to your house should not be tech in general.
No, that is good advice. I mean, I used to have a neighbor who had, a 1960s house, and they had like a pop-up console. So it was like it hit this point where it was like super retro cool that a blender popped up out of their counter.
Wait,
but yeah, but like there's very limited,
Well,
very
you would
limited
just
on
have
what
to
they can
wait
do.
so long for whatever you put in to become cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you got to live through those painful decades.
Exactly.
Well, also, I just think, I think tech can break. And how frustrating, especially if you buy a house from someone who put all this stuff in and you're like, I don't know how to use any of this.
Yeah.
Or, I don't want to use Google Home or whatever. And you're stuck with it and you can't figure out how to like turn your, your shower on or whatever.
Or like you put it in and it's the latest and greatest and you're so excited about it and maybe you're really into tech, but then 3 years later they invent something better and you're going to re-renovate your house? Like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they update the app
Mhm.
and everything disconnects and you don't know how to reconnect it.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's bad.
I'm trying to remember. We had some designer on the podcast recently who was saying their clients now are saying they want a dumb house. Like they
Yeah,
don't
I
want
love that.
they don't want anything to be, connected to their phone because then you have to have your phone,
Yeah,
and yeah.
I like that saying. That's funny.
But that whole concept is kind of lives within this like future-proofing your house
Mm-hmm.
section of the book, which I think is really, really great. So what are some other tips that we can take away for future-proofing our houses?
I think avoiding any kind of trends as best you can is a good one. I think it's a lot easier to say that than to do it, especially now. It's like we're looking at so much content all the time and it's impossible to not be influenced by it. But I think that if you fall back on choosing things that you love and have always loved, you are future proofing your house. Because if something feels good to you, it's always going to feel good to you. It doesn't mean that it felt good to you today and like 6 months from now you're going to be over it, because that's just something that's been tried and true and you know that you like it. I also think that following kind of let your house dictate what it needs. So like follow your own architecture, figure out like when your house was built and what kind of materials were being used then and what were the different profiles for faucets that were being used then. Just kind of all of that stuff and making it feel true to your house. It makes it feel classic. And so again, it's not going to date itself. And it's just like when in doubt, look to the past. Don't look for what's cool now. And that will keep things feeling more timeless. And then the other thing that I talk about a decent amount is falling back on like vintage and living materials, meaning things that aren't going to stay frozen in time. Because I think if you put like a vintage area rug in your room, for example, that's already like 75 years old, it doesn't feel like you necessarily bought that in 2025. You could have bought that at any given point. And so it's not so of any particular moment, and it's going to have a longer lifespan.
I also love that you added mixing metals as part of a way to future-proof.
Yeah, I think that there are metals that become really trendy. So there are like the obvious ones, like I feel like black metal had like matte black metal had like a moment. And now I feel like you would have to renovate. Like I feel like you would probably already, I feel like I just offended people. I don't want to say that.
No, but I mean, if you're not like settling in all on one, that makes
basically
it seems easier to swap out.
It's easier to swap out, but it's also you probably won't need to as much, because instead of anchoring yourself to one time period when something was popular, you introduced hints of it, but it's not necessarily the overwhelming material in the room. So you got to use something that you like, but it also isn't like the defining factor.
No,
Right.
that makes so much sense. Like, I think we've all seen those houses where, maybe it was like that polished brass from the 90s, and literally every the like switch on the ceiling fan and the bathroom knobs and the kitchen faucet and the kitchen knobs and it's like literally the rim around the shower door, every single thing was the exact same finish. And so then, yes, it had a single moment.
Exactly.
And then you walk in and it's so easy to spot that. Whereas if you've got like, maybe you've got polished brass in one room, but then you've got some nickel, you've got chrome, it's sort of like varied throughout. It's like harder to spot and put a timestamp on it. Yeah,
exactly. It also makes it easier to like change things around if you want to in the future. Like I was talking with somebody recently and they were doing a renovation, and they were saying how they really wanted to do all chrome everywhere. And I was just cautioning them that, like, if 3 years from now they want to renovate only one bathroom, is it going to feel weird to them to not go with chrome then, because every other thing in the house is chrome?
True.
And so I feel like it's human nature to change your mind and evolve and want to redo things. And it's part of just having fun and enjoying your home. And I feel like if you make your rules too rigid for yourself, you're kind of like taking away that experience for yourself.
And your doorknobs do not have to be the same finish as your light switch and your, cabinet hardware and like every single thing. It's like
100%.
I've never even considered the finish of my doorknobs as like being needing to match anything, I guess.
Yeah.
But there's like that polished brass doorknob that I can just think of with, that certain house. Yeah. Okay, there was a point in the book where you were talking about how early in your career people would call you to help them like put the finishing touches on the space. Like they, felt like they picked out good stuff, they liked what they had, but they weren't getting to that final finish line that they wanted, but they couldn't figure out how to get there. So I'm curious, like, what are those things that people are missing at the end of their project that are keeping them from getting to that finish line that you would then have gone in and helped them, finalize?
I think that people generally underdress their rooms. Like, I think people think that they need less than they actually do. So there are kind of like the easier things that would come up more often than not, which are things like pillows and maybe a pillow scheme that's like not so matching. Like maybe it feels like a little bit more natural. And I feel like that makes a room feel more finished than just like set pairs. And obviously, styling bookcases and things like that. But then I also think often it comes down to, if you have a blank wall, you actually need like a console table on that, or you can add another set of ottomans to your seating area and make it feel more social and more filled in. And I actually think it's often those bigger things that make more of a difference in finalizing it than the little odds and ends and accessorizing at the end. Because I think it feels like more of a risk. But when you do those things and put them in, the room really does just feel like finished and more usable and more inviting and more comfortable and all of those things.
So it's almost like they haven't put enough furniture in their room.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That might actually be a good segue into our decorating dilemma, unless you have something else you wanted to ask, Liz.
That's perfect.
No, I think this is a really great segue to this decorating dilemma.
It's from Kristen, and she says, "Hi, Ballard ladies. I'm Kristen from outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We bought a house 2 years ago as a flip, and while it's not our forever home, I aim to invest in quality pieces that last. I want to add character to our basic home with a classic, elegant, traditional style infused with a warm coastal vibe. Think Nancy Meyers and Ralph Lauren. With a 7-year-old son, dog, and husband, everything needs to be practical yet put together. Here's my living room dilemma. Our current 31-inch round glass nesting table, coffee table, needs replacing due to maintenance and sturdiness issues. I'm considering alternatives that accommodate drinks and snacks without matching our existing sofa ottoman. What style would you suggest? And then an area rug. I plan to use the Ballard Designs Antelope hand-tufted rug, good choice, in natural. I'm torn between a 9x12, which will extend past the sofa towards the kitchen, and a 10x14, which will nearly touch the media console. Which size would be best? And then in the dining room, another area rug question. The space is rectangular with a jut out on the right, and the dining table is 60 inches round. I'm considering a 9x9 square wool rug. Thoughts on the style, pattern, and size? Paint. Currently, the walls are gray throughout both rooms. I'd like to explore a neutral for the living room and a different color for the dining room, possibly incorporating white. I'm hesitant about wallpaper due to potential resale in 5 years. Which whites or colors would you recommend? Thanks for considering my questions. I love your podcast, and I'm a loyal Ballard Designs customer. Thanks, Kristen." She has such a pretty space. I'm so impressed.
A pretty space. It's so
beautiful.
pretty.
It's
done
so
an excellent job.
relaxing.
Yeah. Okay. What are your initial thoughts?
Okay. So for the living room, specifically for her question surrounding the coffee table, because she mentioned that she has a young family, I would probably do a wood coffee table that has some type of texture already to it, so that if her kid is like coloring on there or whatever, not on the table, but on a piece of paper on the table.
Oh, or on the table, because that's what's going to happen.
Let's be real.
Yeah.
Or on the table, that it can kind of stand up to that, and she doesn't need to stress about everything looking so perfect. She has a darker floor, so I think I would probably actually do a lighter wood finish for her coffee table. Maybe that's something that pulls from the matchstick shades that she has, just to kind of keep it feeling like light and bright and warm, like she mentioned. And then for the area rug, it's so tricky. Normally, I would always say size up. But as long as it is coming past the sofa, I'm actually going to say in this case, do the 9x12 because it makes me nervous that she's starting to inch towards the kitchen otherwise. And I wouldn't want the counter stools to back up onto the rugs. So I would go with the 9x12. And I love the style of the rug that she mentioned.
Yeah, that rug can go anywhere and everywhere.
It's so fun also.
I think it's going to look really nice with her blinds and her leather chair because it has some of that like caramel color in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She's done a beautiful job. Okay. I kind of like the coffee table. I mean, I know she says she can't keep it for sturdiness issues, but it looks good. It's a great size.
I know, it looks really good.
Yeah.
I know, honestly.
And it seems well sized too. It's great.
It really does. When I was looking at this room, I was almost like, I don't want to give my opinion. She's doing great.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
And then there's the dining room rug. What are your thoughts on that?
Dining room rug. Okay. I kind of like the idea of incorporating some color. So she obviously has a lot of blues going on. I think I would pull from that. So wool was a really smart choice. It's going to wear really well. I think something maybe geometric because she has the rug in the living room that's not so far. So maybe like a Greek key or something along that line. I think in shades of blue would be so nice.
What about her paint color?
Currently the walls are gray and she wants to do a white.
Yes. She said white.
She's looking for a neutral in the living room and a different color for the dining room.
Possibly white. She's hesitant about wallpaper. I think she should do wallpaper.
I know. I feel
do
like
a peel
she
and
should
stick.
too.
And then
she should do a peel and stick, honestly. You know what I really think would be so pretty? A peel and stick grass cloth and also another shade of light blue would be so pretty in there.
Mm-hmm.
Or even like an indigo color. I mean, I know that would be dark for her, but it might be a nice contrast.
It would be beautiful.
She has a lot of light in here, so it wouldn't be crazy to put a dark color because you've got so much light that it probably won't end up feeling that dark.
Right.
And it'll just be so dramatic.
It'll also make her lighter furniture pop, I think, in such a nice way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Would you suggest doing grass cloth above the chair rail and below the chair rail, just one or the other?
I would do the whole thing. I think it's nice I think it's more impactful and it feels more immersive when you do floor to ceiling. So I would do it all. And then I would paint the chair rail a color to match, to basically pull from that grass cloth.
So not white.
Not white.
Okay. Well, Kristen, we're hoping that you are skilled enough in your DIY to do peel and stick on your own. And then that way, when you get done, when you're ready to sell in 5 years, which is a long time, by the way. So you'll still get a lot of use out of this wallpaper.
And I've got to say, peel and stick grass cloth is very forgiving because you don't have to match a pattern. And I've done it myself. So you got this.
So you said light wood table, similar size to what she's already got. Make sure that it's already got like some texture or, patina to it so that you're not terrified that it's going to scratch. 9x12 area rug for the living room, something with a geometric in the dining room, and then the peel and stick wallpaper in the dining room.
She's good to go.
I know.
She's so
got
good
such a good, you have a great eye. Yeah.
I honestly think like if she gets the rug in there, she might even keep the coffee table.
I know. The coffee table is really nice.
Well, she said it's a sturdiness issue. What did she say? She said maintenance and
I
sturdiness.
think with the little ones.
Oh, and probably fingerprints.
But a rug might help make it feel less wobbly.
Yeah, true. Oh, that's a great point, actually. Yeah. Even if you don't want to keep it for here, you should keep it and just don't get rid of it because it's great looking. I like the finish.
Yeah, and she's moving in 5 years, so you
Yeah.
never know in her next house.
Yeah, you might have 2 living rooms in your next house.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for listening, Kristen, and best of luck. And let us know what you decide. Thanks for writing in. All right, Emma, tell everyone where they can find you, follow you, and pick up your book.
My website is emmabarrell.com. My Instagram is @EmmaBarrell. And my book, House Rules, is on Amazon, at Target, Barnes & Noble, wherever you buy your books.
Nice. It really was really enjoyable. So thank you. And again, great housewarming gift to anyone that's like, or, first apartment, anything like that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me.
It really was. Thanks for joining us. All right. That's our show. And that's our show. You can find all of the show notes on our blog, howtodecorate.com/podcast.
To send in a decorating dilemma, email your questions to podcast@ballarddesigns.net so we can help you with your space.
And of course, be sure to follow us on social media at Ballard Designs.
Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And please leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback.
Until next time, happy
Happy
decorating.